Thank you. Kia ora koutou, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's hearing of Kaipara District Council regarding the representation review, and these are hearings for the initial proposal for the representation review of this council. I'm going to open this afternoon's hearings with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapu tainamu te moana, hei hoa rahi ma tātou I te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou ia, tātou katoa. At this point, I would like to call for apologies for this meeting, and I have an apology for lateness from Councillor Joyce Paki at this point. And everyone else is present. We have one councillor, but he has not provided his apologies. So I'm seeking a seconder for that, Councillor Curnow. Thank you. We'd like to put that to the vote now, approving and receiving that apology. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. We have one item on the agenda for this afternoon, and which is, of course, the submission on the representation review, the initial proposal. So I'd like to move the confirmation of the agenda, and I'm seeking a seconder for that. Councillor Wills. Yes? Thank you, Councillor Wills. Is there any discussion on the confirmation of the agenda item? No, thank you. So we're putting that to the vote now. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 1.4, conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflicts of interest regarding this afternoon's business? Elected members. No conflicts of interest. Thank you. Right. So we'll move on with our work for today. We have on page number 2 of our agenda a recommendation that the Kaipara District Council receives the submissions on the representation review 2021 initial proposal, and here's the 7 submitters who wish to be heard. So this is all of the written submissions plus hearing those of you who wish to be heard. So Councillor Curnow is moving that at this point. And
could I just jump in? I'm not sure that we've actually got 7. Can we have confirmation whether we are actually getting 7 who wish to be heard?
So we have
4 present.
We have 4 present, and we have others who have said that they would turn up. Okay. And some who haven't responded but wished to.
Okay, on that basis, yeah, the 7 submitters who wish to be heard. Okay, yep. I'm happy to move that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So that's moved as printed there, and a seconder for that, Councillor Wilson Collins. Thank you. That puts this onto the table, and we're now going to move into hearing our feedback from our members of the community who wanting to be heard here. So thank you for this opportunity. Michael Day, we're going to start with you. Is there a presentation at the top of this item? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there is no presentation. The covering report will be taken as read. We've received 64 submissions on the initial proposal. 7 wish to be heard, and today is the opportunity for those submitters wishing to be heard to speak to Council and put their views forward.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very clear. Thanks for that. So let's get on with the show, as they say. We've just been joined by a further one of those submitters and by our electoral officer, Dale Osowski, as well. So thank you for joining us, Dale. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with Helen Kareen for a presentation and from you, please. And so the purpose of this, of course, is for you to be providing your feedback to us. There is then an opportunity for elected members to ask questions of clarification for you and of your presentation. And then at the conclusion of your presentation, if you're welcome to stay in this electronic meeting to observe the other comments that are made from other members of the community, as well as the electoral officer, and how we get to the end of this item, or you may go if you choose to. But I would also request that everyone keeps their computers onto mute unless they are speaking, please. So Helen, kia ora, good afternoon. Welcome to this format, and we're looking forward to your 5 minutes of presentation. Kia ora, thank you. Oh, you're on mute. No. There's a button on the bottom that says mute, and if you hit that.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Well done.
Okay. Thank you. I made a submission, as I have done the past 2 times that the representation arrangements have been reviewed. And I need to point out the past 2 times I've also appealed to the Local Government Commission the arrangements made. And I guess my concern is about the dominance of the West Coast in Dargaville, and the fact that the data that is used, which I know you have to use, because of the shifting population and the growth in Mangawhai is incredibly out of date by the time it gets to be used. So you're doing what you have to do. You've reduced the number, you've changed the number of wards, and you've acknowledged the population shift to the east. But there will be a very big increase before a 6-year election. So my primary request would be a review in 3 years' time, because based on past records, i.e. the New Zealand Stats guesstimates of population and the massive growth we're experiencing over here, the figures will be about 25% out at least by the time you hit the census in March 2023. I contributed to the Mangawhai Matters submission to you earlier this year, because it seemed to us that if we came forward with our ideas earlier in the piece, it might help. So I'm pleased to see that some of that work has been noted, and there has been some response. It'll be interesting to see what the result of having a Maori ward is. And we don't know at this point what the uptake of a Maori electoral roll is going to be. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So I think you've done what you had to do, but I think you're going to need to look at it again in 3 years' time, because the population movement is way too great to allow this to stand for 6 years. That's all I have to say, but I'd be happy to have any conversation with anybody who wants to ask a question.
Thank you, Helen. That was very, very clear. Thank you. And we have our first question for clarification from Councillor Mark Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Helen, I hope you don't mind me calling you that.
That's fine, Mark.
Yeah, good. So it's quite clear the key point you've made in your submission, that you think it's would be a really sensible idea to have a further representation review in 3 years' time, because inevitably we end up behind the play in terms of the process we have to follow with the numbers, the statistics.
Mhm.
So apart from that, what other would you, because you have said in your submission, that you oppose the present representation arrangements, or the proposed representation arrangements. So how would you have us do it instead?
Well, I did contribute to the Mangawhai Matters one, which floated a variety of proposals. I guess one of the concerns we had was the remuneration available to councillors, and so that if you increase the number of councillors, which you're proposing by adding an extra, then that reduces the remuneration pool. So one of our proposals was actually to reduce it down to 7.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
I still
Okay.
think that's a good idea, but we need to see how the Maori ward system plays out, and whether you get people choosing to be on the Maori electoral roll. It will be interesting.
Yes, well, they may not get to exercise that discretion until they've had a chance to change their allegiance if they are on the general roll at present. However, that's not a question. And I guess it's also not a question. So I guess as a council, we voted to increase the number of councillors, which is a bit like turkeys voting for Christmas in terms of
That's right.
giving ourselves a pay cut. But there you go. Perhaps that's not the money, that's what we do it for.
Well,
But
I guess
time.
the problem for Mangawhai is we only had 2 people stand, so we had no election. So I guess the remuneration would be part of that, and we want to attract people over on the east side to stand for council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, question for clarification.
Yes, thank you, Helen. I get the gist of your submission that you feel that there's a political underrepresentation of Mangawhai and Kaiwaka side. And so I sort of want to suggest 2 things. What do you make of the fact that there is a large number of...
Sorry, Councillor De Lavaris, questions for clarification. So we need to stay within Helen's presentation, please. Thank you.
Yes. Do you think that it's important as well that the people who are not full-time resident are actually represented in the representation?
Yeah, absolutely, Victoria. I think it's something like 40% of our rate payers are non-resident. So we're enormously behind, I guess, because of that in terms of representation. But you don't have to allow for that. So I guess what I observe over the last 10 years, I guess, is the council doing as miserly least it possibly can to allow us to have some representation. But my experience with the Local Government Commission is they will trot out the rules, and you don't have to count them. But it's a massive thing in terms of where your rate take is. You know, I pay rates of $5,500 a year, and I haven't even got a footpath. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, that question was outside Helen's presentation. So I'm just mindful that you need to keep within the realms of the bounds of the presentation as provided, whether that's the written presentation or the oral one. So thank you, please. We're questions for clarification only. Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification? That's why I say questions for clarification. It's not ranging questions on the subject. Questions for clarification on Helen's very clear submission. No further questions on that, Helen. So thank you. So you're a very clear presentation, and you're very heard. So thank you today for your presentation, and we'll move on now to another person. But you're welcome to stay and participate or witness the rest of the afternoon. But please, if you put your computer back on mute, thank you.
Thank you.
So at this point, we're going to go now to Ken Wrighton from down in Poto. And so we're going to hear next from Ken. Thank you. Kia ora, Ken.
Mayor for presentation today.
Ken, what we might ask you to do.
Basically, I am opposed to Mary Ward.
Ken, if you just hold, please, just for a moment, Ken. If you would please turn off your video camera, so we've just got the sound, and it's not that we don't want to see you. What happens is that the bandwidth of the phone lines sometimes can't handle it. So it's very important that we hear you, but we know that you're there, and we know that you're you. So yeah, thank you. Over to you.
Okay.
5 minutes. Thanks, Ken.
Can you hear me
Yes, thank you.
now? Can you hear me now? Good. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm opposed to the Mary Ward. All New Zealanders are equal. Under the normal council election methods, it can be provided, representation can be provided for all races and agendas if candidates are willing to stand. Current council has got Maoris or Iwis on it, elected from the community, and they're doing a great job for the community. We don't need to have a political watchdog as part of our council. My final point, New Zealand is starting to divide itself, and I'm really concerned about that. I don't consider myself to be a racial person. I was brought up in a Maori community in Te Kaupuru, Te Maori area back in the day, and I am happy. I have a lot of Maori friends. It's great. They're nice people, but I am opposed to setting up the Maori Ward, and that's pretty much all I've got to say, guys.
All right, thank you, Ken. Thank you. So elected members, are there questions for clarification of Ken's submission, noting again that we stay within the bounds of what he's talked about? Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a little bit tricky because there's not much written, but I'm going from your point, Ken. Thank you for your submission. And it was well put, very clear. Would you, this may be out of frame, but would you still be opposed to Māori wards if you understood that there would be possibly a savings to ratepayers because the consultation would not have to be so onerous with our iwi partners? So that's currently what council has to do in decision making, but having a Māori ward means that one of the partners will be at the table, and therefore less onerous in terms of consultation, and therefore possibly a savings to the ratepayer.
I'd say that is out of the bounds, actually, of what Ken was talking to. Ken, you don't have to answer that question. And also, just for clarification for elected members, both written and the oral submissions count. So the oral submission may be different from what is a written submission here, and neither has dominance or precedence over the other. So they're equally as valid as each other. So Ken, you don't have to answer that question because it's on the subject, but it's outside the bounds of what you spoke to.
Okay, just one other point, Mr. Mayor, is I might not be looking at this 100% correctly, but I see the three waters as another phase in an iwi, into our local government. Our local government should be controlled by our local people who put their hands up and are elected as per our council representation voting. We don't need these outside people. We've got good.
Okay,
What is from others?
okay, thank you, Ken. That adds to your earlier first part of your submission there, but it's kind of off the subject of the representation review. But we're certainly hearing that regarding the rest of the work that council is involved with. Are there further questions for clarification, Councillor Mark Vincent?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if you could indulge me if we could ask the advice of the electoral officer about a matter relating to Mr. Wrighton's submission.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay.
It's outside of scope, basically, from a representation review. So things such as the electoral system or yes or no in principle to Māori wards, or in fact remuneration, are all outside of the scope of the representation review, so we cannot consider those.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification on Ken's submission at this point?
It was quite interesting in your document. Oh, I haven't got my camera on, but the document as regards to the representative review 2001, it had there what's the status quo, which states it before, then it comes down to the changes. Hey, and in the changes, that's where we see the Maori ward.
Thank you, Ken. That's clear. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, question for clarification.
Yes, for clarification, Ken, you mentioned that we currently have Māori in our council, and were you aware that they are elected to stand for specific wards, like currently 2 different wards,
Yes.
and that therefore they are not elected with a mandate to speak for Māori issues? They're actually that they are representing their ward rather than iwi partners or Māori or mana whenua or tangata whenua.
Councillor De Lavaris, we seek questions for clarification. We're not.
That was a question.
We're not here to explain.
Were you aware, Ken, that their representation is not specific to that interest group?
It does have repercussions across the board for everybody. I think the point that I like to make most strong is all New Zealanders are equal. And
thank you, Ken.
That's really all I've got to say. Sorry, guys.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. Thank you. Ken, again, if you'll go on to mute now, and you may wait in the waiting room and watch the rest of the proceedings. Thank you. We're now going to go to Paul Whiteman, who's been waiting very patiently. He was the first person on the call. So thank you, Paul. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hear me?
Yes, so we can hear you perfectly. Yes, thank you. And so you have 5 minutes and then questions for clarification.
Well, it won't take me 5 minutes, but anyway. Something I've written. Kaipara has a population of 25,000 residents. It shouldn't matter if they don't work, live or play in the area. They are ratepayers and they are residents. As proposed, 10 elected members, 2 are elected over the whole area, leaving 8 ward councillors with 25,000 residents in Kaipara. And as I said in my submission, the Mayor has said in the media several times last year and this year, Mengai Kaiwaka has half of Kaipara's population. So that equals 12,500 residents in the Mengai Kaiwaka area, with a councillor representing 25,000 residents. The maths say 4, could even be 5 councillors for Mangawhai Kaiwaka ward using the plus minus 10% rule. It certainly will be 5 in the next couple of years if Mangawhai Central and numerous other big subdivisions go ahead. I also think we need a community board. I'm sure there will be plenty that would do this for free if elected. Mangawhai Kaiwaka ward is the fastest growing ward in the district of the North Island, not Kaipara. We need some fairer representation on the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very clear. So, elected members, are there questions for your clarification from what Paul has said? Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock.
So thank you very much. So to clarify, you think that there should be more representatives for the Mangawhai Kaiwaka ward than the current proposal. Is that correct?
Yes, according to the maths that I'm using, it's 4, could even be 5.
And is it also correct to say that you think that the use of community boards would be a good solution to increase representation for that area?
Well, when I read what was said on the council, the briefing was really that community boards would have to be paid for and so forth. So I'm just saying that there would be plenty here at Mangawhai, I'd say, that would do it for free, just to be on a community board if elected.
Are you putting your hand up, Mr. Whiteman?
Oh, it could be one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, Paul. Could you run me through your maths again, please? Because if you're talking about the need for 4 councillors for that ward, then I'm not too sure how big our council would end up being if you followed on the same mathematical equation. So how many people per councillor are you thinking?
Well, you know, I'm not the best mathematician, but I saw some figures there when they used over 9 councillors, and now we're talking over 10 councillors. Over 9 councillors, I think they said they represent 2,600. So if you put this over the 10 councillors, they represent 2,300. And if half of the Kaipara residents in the Mangawhai Kaiwaka area, they should get at least 4. I would say.
Perhaps might you be including the mayor as one of the 10 councillors?
Yeah, and the Mary ward, but they're over the whole area.
Yeah. So if you took them,
you'd have to take basically 5,000 off that figure, but that's over the whole area, wouldn't it?
so which area are you referring to? Sorry.
Over the whole
of the district.
Mm.
The whole district, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll chew on that. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification? Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock.
I'm wondering if I can ask a question of Dale Osowski about the submission that was made or the point that was made, Mr. Mayor. Am I allowed to?
Certainly. That's so our electoral officer is here to help with points of clarification. Yes.
So would it be correct to say, Dale, that that the workload of councillors would be diminished the more councillors were incumbent? I'm trying to think about, you know, the remuneration will go down the more councillors are sitting, but whether or not that could be offset by a less burdensome number of committees or duties to sit, you know, is there a relationship between the number of councillors and the role?
Probably a little bit out of my sphere there, councillor. I thought you were going to ask me about the statistics and things like that, which I can talk about from the submitters' figures, but probably what you're asking me is probably a little outside of my knowledge.
Perhaps Mr. Maris may be able to enlighten Councillor de Lavares Woodcock here.
Maybe, maybe not, Your Worship. Thank you. It's an imperfect science. There are too many variables involved because, as you'll know, as elected members, the number of people that contact you, etc., is variable based on the community and your input into the community and how you interact with your community. I suppose from a council perspective, the workload remains the same. So the number of meetings remain the same. All councillors will need to attend and all of that sort of carry on. So I think there's a constant there at least. Hope that helps.
Thank you. So are there further questions for clarification of Paul at this point? Councillor Vincent, I think you might be on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wonder if we should take up the electoral officer's comment or his hint that he could perhaps speak to the statistics that were used in Mr. Whiteman's submission. I think that would be helpful. So, thank you.
Dale, would you like to offer any further light here? Thank you.
Thank you for that. We are required to use the latest population estimates, which are provided by the Department of Statistics, and the latest ones available are at 30th of June 2020. So that gives us a total population, general population. So we have to take out the Maori electoral population first. So the total general electoral population is 21,500. And then when you apply that to the proposed 3 wards, Kaiwaka Mangawhai will have 7,960 population. So that's quite a bit different from your 12,500 that was suggested. And then we have Otapatea at 4,960 and Wairoa at 8,580, which brings you up to the 21,500. So we are required by law to use those figures. We do get those from the Department of Statistics. So each time we do a review, these are the figures we are required to use, provided by the Department of Statistics. Does that help?
Thank you for that extra information. But I would say, elected members, we need to go back because this is not the focus of this needs to be on the presentations from our submitters. So we've already received all this other information, and so now you're receiving it again. But it's good for our submitters to hear this extra information that being repeated for elected members, but to hear this for clarity. Are there further questions for clarification by elected members of Paul's presentation? None. Thank you. Look, thank you, Paul. Thank you for a clear presentation. Take no what am I saying? Or take few questions as a sign that your message has been very clear. Okay, so that's a good thing. Thank you very much. So if you could please put your device onto mute, and you're welcome to stay and watch the rest of the proceedings. Thank you. At this point, we're going to go to Colin Hanna from Federated Farmers. Thank you, Colin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councillors. On behalf of Federated Farmers, I wish to acknowledge the work that Sean Hazelton put into working with me over this response. I need to acknowledge also John Blackwell and his work that we did when we looked through what the representation across the area would be. Federated Farmers as an organisation was first thought of by Mr. Glass in 1899 in Kaitaia. So, and the reason for that was there needed to be a rural voice, and we are starting to see that that needs to be loud and clear. Federated Farmers Northland Province, we are now the 8th largest province in terms of members in New Zealand. We were a few years ago the smallest. And I think history is loaded with examples of what happens when people lose their voice. So based on looking at what we've seen, and Mangawhai, which is the fastest growing region, as we've heard, and Federated Farmers doesn't dispute that at all, within Kaipara, what we are concerned about is the rural residents in the Kaiwaka area will actually lose their voice. And I think that's fairly important, because once you start electing members and you've got a big population, of course, the urban members will, by just the sheer numbers, win the vote. So, and we'll see, we're going to see a power shift away across the region to Mangawhai over time anyway, but Federated Farmers are concerned about that power shift, but we're also concerned about the lifestyles and farmers in Kaiwaka losing their voice. That's about the end of our presentation, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. That's very clear. Of course, your written submission is also very detailed, goes into community boards, and you're supportive of our decision in the proposal not to go in the direction of community boards, and you are supportive of the direction of Māori ward as well. So thank you for your clear written submission in addition to what you've just said. So the question regarding the perceived Kaiwaka and Mangawhai divide, if you like, those two settlements, if you like, or rural Kaiwaka and then Mangawhai, we're going to call it Mangawhai City, okay, so that we're being really clear what we're talking about here. Would you propose that there be a different formulation for that, so that there would be one person for Kaiwaka going across the map, as far as then there would be another two for the rest of Mangawhai from wherever that would be? Is that the kind of vision that you have?
That is,
yeah.
That is one of the solutions that we had in mind, without actually, or the other way you could do it, you could also have an elected person who stands in that Kaiwaka area, but is part of that Kaiwaka Mangawhai ward.
Sorry, could you explain that last sentence again? Sorry.
Is that an elected member of the elected member from Kaiwaka would, so you probably would have to have a ward boundary, Jason, as you just expressed, yes. Yeah.
Sorry, because okay, thank you. Because yeah, one can never tell who's going to stand for these elections.
That's right.
So
when I think about it, you're right. Yep.
So I'm just questioning whether that in that representation request that you have, that there would be a specific carving off of within that current ward. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think that's clear. Further questions for clarification? Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your submission there. That's really awesome. Am I allowed to talk to Dale Ofsowski about, hey Dale, about whether that's possible? Does the population allow for the percentages to work out for something like that?
I'd say perhaps right now is not the time for that level of discussion, I would say, Councillor Wilson-Collins, but it may be work that Dale may be directed to go and consider. But regarding the we can't expect Dale to have those numbers here today. That's what we're saying. We're needing to hear from the submissions. Mr. Maris, could you shed any light on the process that I'm talking to here? Please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, Your Worship, thank you. We'll see what we can do in that space. The deliberations agenda actually will come out subsequent to the hearing today or tomorrow as well. So that's something that you can pick up during deliberations, and I'm just going to ask Dale off the hoof to have that perhaps ready for to inform the deliberations when we have them fairly soon.
Thank you. So it's another piece of the process yet ahead, Councillor Wilson-Collins, but excellent question. Thank you. Councillor Vincent, question for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you for your submission. I did actually, honestly, I did enjoy reading it, Colin. I thought it was very thoughtful. And to get a handle better on what you're proposing, I mean, there may be more than one way to skin the cat. I mean, in your preparing it, did you consider the option of, in effect, extending that rural part of the current Kawaka-Mangawai ward to add it to the Otamatea ward to thereby ensure a more a rural focused ward than Mangawai on its own would be?
That, Mr. Vincent, is a possibility, but we hadn't considered that. We were leaving it up to you, the experts, to decide just how that might fall.
And it's within the proposal, but that's interesting. Yeah, further questions for clarification? No further questions. Thank you, Colin. That's very clear. And again, thank you for a detailed and professional written submission as well. It's always nice to see these things. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of Colin's submission. Thank you. So next and final here is Gordon Lamberth. Gordon, good afternoon. 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. As you well know, I'm quite passionate about Dargaville. I'm passionate about this area. I have concerns that the growth in Dargaville has been stifled over the years with bad planning decisions made from Mangawhai. I can back this up with a number of statistics relating to the medium house price going through the roof in Dargaville. And the most evident statistic that there is the unoccupancy rate of residential dwellings in Dargaville. Dargaville is full up both commercially and residentially. The unoccupancy rate of dwellings in Dargaville is 1%. The average for the district is 36%. The town is full up. There are no developments going ahead. One of the problems we do have with any developers, if we want a developers meeting, we must drive all the way to Mangawhai. The planners will not come up here. The Resource Management Act has been very, very difficult and hard on Dargaville, along with the district plan, is where every alteration, addition, new home virtually needs a resource consent, which is onerous and is putting people off. Dargaville itself has had a 12.8% increase in population in the last statistics during 2018, and that has been increasing by 200 to 300 people a year. Your projected population of Dargaville itself is 6,169 by your Infometrics information that you've given, and that's by 2051. We will reach that in 2 years' time. The statistics that we're given and we're making these decisions on is very much like trying to drive a car while looking in the rearview mirror. We're 3 or 4 years behind the times. The median house price in Dargaville rose 96% in 1 year alone. We have a massive housing crisis here and our population has been stifled. It's 2 minutes, I'll carry on. When I compare the Kaipara District Council and the number of councillors and population to other councils around, Whangarei has 90,960. It has 13 councillors at a ratio just under 1 to 7,000. The far north, 64,500 people, 9 councillors, a ratio of 7,155. Dargaville, 25,180, 8 councillors. We have the absolute luxury of one councillor per every 3,147 people. It is an indulgence which you've got too many councillors compared to our neighbouring areas. My big suggestion is don't go by councillors for the districts, move the boundaries, not the councillors. That is the fairest way. If you're not going to adopt community boards where that can be taken up and you move to the 1 to 7,000 ratio, which you would only have 4 councillors, including the Maori ward, 1 east, 1 central and 1 west, and they would take their information from the community boards. You could afford to pay those councillors more, and they could take their message from their community boards. Just going through my notes here, so bear with me. The population, just by those statistics of unoccupied dwellings, we know, and I don't mean it as a derogatory term, but they often speak about towns as being bedroom states, and that means that people work elsewhere and they come home for the weekend and live in a particular area. That is evident in some parts of the east coast of this district. When we have a look at the rates intake, the latest information that I have received is 73% of the rates intakes come from the West Coast and Dargaville ward. I'm almost done here. The biggest thing that I must point out is, although Dargaville and the West Coast area has experienced a population increase, we're going to experience a decrease in councillors. Whatever we look at from the East Coast, whatever is fair or unfair, that just doesn't seem right. That because our population is growing, we get a decreased representation. And that's contradicting what I said before. That's the way we should be moving, because we should be moving to less councillors. There are 4 councillors that are here that are before.
5 minutes.
Sorry?
Thank you, Gordon. That's your 5 minutes is up for your presentation. Thank you.
I was just doing my last sentence, so.
Time flies when you're having fun. Yes, have your last sentence quickly.
Yeah, well, the 4 councillors that represent the Dargaville and West Coast wards, I just want to remind you who voted you and who you're representing.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Very clear. Elected members, are there questions for clarification of Gordon's presentation at this point? Councillor Wilson-Collins, then Councillor Curnow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Gordon, for your very passionate submission. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. You're talking about 4 councillors, but could you expand on that? What kind of representation, ward system at large, just so I can get an understanding of where you're coming from there.
If we move to your neighbouring councils and abide by what they're doing, they've got a representation of 1 councillor per every 7,000 people. The KDC has a councillor per every 3,147. Should we be reducing? There's a question that you've got to answer. Should we be reducing the number of councillors and maybe looking at community wards for a more even representation? Or should we be streamlining the whole thing down to meet what our neighbours are doing?
Sorry, I'll clarify my question. Do you support a ward system, or are you suggesting that 4 councillors should be at large, or do you not have an opinion on that?
There is a big struggle for power within the council in the way certain councillors vote. The ward system isn't going to work if we start chopping it up from statistics 3 years ago with such a small base to work from, and we start trying to juggle councillors around in different wards to represent them. Have I answered it or not? No? No?
Okay.
No, but that's fine. We'll move on. I think I understand where you're coming.
Yeah, we'll work with your statement. Thank you, Gordon. Councillor Curnow and then Councillor Vincent.
Yeah, I'm just interested in your thoughts about having fewer councillors. It was a discussion we had at length in our deliberate or in our consideration of early proposals about whether that gives a good balance of representative views around the table. So I'm just interested in your thoughts as to whether fewer councillors, do you feel, would be able to bring that sort of wide representation to the table or not?
No, they would have to have a pyramid underneath them of community boards.
Right. So you think it only works if it's got community boards underneath it?
Yes, but the problem is that we've got such a small base and such a small numbers that if we start trying to juggle councillors around to evenly represent the population, we're just making a mess from statistics which we get 3 years ago. The community boards may be a more even way of distributing that around because they can be increased and decreased as per the population.
Right. Okay. All right. That's clear. So it only works if it's got community boards in your view. Yeah. Cool. That's how you get around that. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent, question for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Afternoon, Gordon.
Afternoon, mate.
I just making sure. So what the big deal is one Maori ward, which is effectively off the table because that's not part of our considerations today.
Yeah, that's a Parliament decision.
Yeah, and there, well, it was a council decision too before the Parliament came along. Then the 3 general wards basically spread evenly across the district, so that there would be if you had 2 councillors in each of those 3 wards, then it would look rather like the Mangawhai Matters submission, I suspect. But have I got the general handle on what you're saying? And effectively, too, it doesn't work in your terms without community boards, correct?
It could work without community boards, but the boundaries need to change, not pushing the councillors around, so that those 2 councillors that represent the West Coast, the boundary moves accordingly where they've got a third of the representation.
Yep. In terms
and that
of
central ward, as per the Federated Farmers Submission, would look after that central area. And I would suspect that Mangawhai's boundary, or the Mangawhai Kaiwaka boundary, would retreat further back to the East Coast, depending on what their population growth is.
Okay. Now, just a clarification regarding community boards. Would you envisage that there would be one community board for each ward, or one community board for just key strategic areas, say like Mangawhai and Dargarwood?
Well, that's what your northern part council has gone by that way, and that's the one that the Whangarei District Council was also muting and are still debating. Yes, so each ward would have their own pyramid of community board representatives.
So drawn from the ward at large, of like the boundaries of that ward. So you're talking 3 community boards.
Yes.
Yeah. One for each ward relating to the whole of that ward boundary area. Yep. Okay. Thank you. I understand now.
Councillor Curnow, question for clarification. No, that was the no. Okay. I have a question for you, Gordon. It's interesting to make comparisons with other districts, as you have done regarding Whangarei. It's actually at about 9,000 people per councillor, and Far North is at about 7,000. And Kaipara is actually headed towards about 2,400 citizens per elected member. So my question for you is, in your model that you're proposing, one of the things that's guided our work has been the number of Māori role constituents for the Māori ward. And so based on your formula of going, there are 3 other wards and they'll get 1 each, yeah, plus the Māori ward, that Māori ward being only 3,200 people is half of one of the people is if you're being at the same rate, or is actually twice as represented at 3,500 people instead of the 7,000 that you're kind of going for? Could you?
No, the 7,000 that I was going for is just giving an example of what the other councils had. When we are adding more and more councillors, we're bringing that ratio down further and further. I believe that it should be moving up a little bit.
Okay.
And like Councillor Vincent said, you know, if there were two for each East, West and Central, and then one for the Maori ward, we would reduce the number of councillors. That would pay for the budget, hopefully, of any community boards that you've got, and give a fairer representation, but move those boundaries accordingly.
Okay.
Don't move the councillors.
Okay, that's clear. That's clear. Thank you. Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification? No further questions. Thank you. So at this point, we move into the official part of the meeting again. I say the official decision-making part of the meeting, if you like. We've heard the information. So thank you to our presenters again. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Ken, still on the screen. Thank you very much for these presentations. So, but you're welcome to stay for the rest of the show, which is actually only going to take a very short amount of time. The reason why is because we're not going to discuss anything about the content of any of what we have heard today, because that is the work of the deliberations meeting, elected members, which is still weeks away. So there is still work to have done. What we have been here to do today was to hear clearly. And so that is the decision that is before us. We are receiving the submissions and we've heard clearly. So that is the extent, and if there's a box around it, that is the box that we're working in with this part of the process for today. So with that, at this point, we have Deputy Mayor Anna Curnow has moved this, and Councillor Wilson Collins has seconded the receiving of the submissions. And so Councillor Curnow, would you like to make a brief statement?
I'm getting tired. I'm forgetting to unmute. Yeah, just to thank the submitters for their efforts, and not just in coming here today, but also writing your submissions and sending them in to us. It is really helpful when we hear from people, and it does give us an opportunity to test the work that we've done so far. So I really thank you for making the effort, and we really appreciate your thoughts. Yeah, and beyond that, I look forward to the deliberations and to coming to a conclusion. And then I think, as Dale has expressed many times, what happens next is the proposal gets confirmed by us and it goes out for an appeal time. And if there is an appeal raised, then the whole shebang goes off to the Local Government Commission and it gets taken out of our hands. So we're very close to the end of our piece of this particular process. So I thank you for making your contributions. They're heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Wilson Collins, seconding statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just concur with what Councillor Curnow has said, and also to thank all the other people who made written submissions. They possibly didn't want to be heard, but every single submission is valuable. And just to remind those of you that made a submission today might be interested to watch the deliberations next Tuesday online. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. There were 64 submissions to this representation review, many in support, many with added suggestions as well. So our community is passionately cares about democracy in Kaipara, and that's really important to all of us. Are there further statements here? knowing that we have the deliberations next Tuesday. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So since I've responded to every submitter, I suppose I get it's only to complete things if I should say something. I actually did appreciate the number of submissions we received which actually were in support of the proposal as it's been put out. Anyway, we'll get to talk about that some more next Tuesday. Thank you.
That's next Tuesday, but it's important to note that now as well. So thank you for that, Councillor Vincent. Right, no further statements at this point, right? So what we'll do is everyone's in support here. We're putting this to the vote now about receiving the 64 submissions and noting the 7 who wanted to speak. So we're putting that now. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So that brings us safely to the end of this important piece of process and business for us, and brings us, of course, for today to the end of our meeting and the end of our agenda for today. So thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you again for the 64 submitters. Dale Osowski, you've been able to hear directly yourself the proceedings today as our electoral officer. So and there is a video record of today. And so we look forward to that being part of the papers that will be coming to us in due course for the deliberations, which are taking place next Tuesday about the representation review. So on that note, I'm going to close this afternoon's meeting with a karakia thank you. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea ngaro, ki runga ki taina a tātou, kia mahia te hua makihikihi, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te araha, toi te rea Māori, tihei Māori ora. Thank you, everybody. Go well, take care, and stay well. The COVID is now in Northland as of today. There's an